How's it going, everyone? The 1MFP here. I hope you're all doing great today. Today I've got another Hua Chenyu reaction for you. This time it's to Ship of Theseus. This was a song that was recommended to me. I was told that it's built around a melody that was improvised at one of Hua Chenyu's 2021 concerts. So the song was built around that, and now it's a fully fleshed song which he presented at a recent concert in 2024. So I'm definitely interested to hear what it sounds like. With a title like Ship of Theseus, I'm assuming the content is going to relate a lot to Greek mythology. That said, my Greek mythology knowledge is a little bit rusty at this point, so I don't know how much I'll be able to relate the content to notions stemming from Greek mythology, but nevertheless, this is a Hua Chenyu performance. I'm expecting fantastic storytelling. That seems to be a constant with him and these performances. And with that in mind, even without the Greek mythology knowledge, I do think I'll be able to, latch onto something within those lyrics and, find very important meaning in that. So that's what I'm going to attempt to do here with this reaction. And much like always, I'm just going to be watching the video and kind of absorbing the information that I get from it and try and break it down after the video is done. So with that said, let's jump right into the reaction. Let's go. Wow, it's a packed concert. Nice. It's a stadium show.
时间之海将我掩埋，从江声到沧海，迎风而来，让野火枯萎，将命运之歌声一流朝夕的入口，换灵魂再创自在，磨成纤维。赤裸像狗漂流的人，这并非尽头。亚速奔波的船已被谁遗忘？ 间之海将我掩埋，从江水到沧海，迎风而来，摇曳或枯萎，将命运之歌深埋，更换灵魂在中自爱无尽苍白，将我撕碎，由荒芜变尘埃，迎风而来，有周而复始，将命运之歌深埋，更换灵魂在中自爱似明媚。
What a beautiful performance and what a beautiful song. Hua Chenyu never fails to amaze in that sense. The vocals were just so beautiful here, from what Hua Chenyu was doing, but then on top of that you have the backing vocals and the harmonies. They just add so much to this song as well. It definitely puts you in a certain state of mind, and at times it feels peaceful, but at other times it kind of feels like you're drifting away, right? So I do think that fits in really nicely with the lyrics. I would have to kind of pull up the lyrics to jump in and kind of, I guess, decipher them a little further. But one thing I do want to bring up before jumping into that is, I don't know, there's something about Hua Chenyu performances. It feels like he truly understands what type of performance would accompany a song the best. Just giving us the type of visuals to accompany the song that really adds to the feeling of the song. Here I mentioned a feeling of simplicity, peace, and potentially a feeling of, feeling like you're drifting away. Stylistically, I think he portrays that really well, where he's just kind of sitting in the middle of the stage and it's slowly turning around, and underneath him, visually, you've got a lot being projected onto the stage, and you've also got visuals on the screen above him, and those are kind of depicting that perhaps, despite his seeming calmness, there's a lot more going on around him that perhaps he should be aware of. It's kind of reminding the viewer that it's not all that peaceful. So I'll have to jump into the lyrics of the song to really get a feel for how much that idea ties into what is presented within the song. So without further ado, let's go ahead and do that. I guess before even starting with the lyrics, I do find it surprising to see how much was said in this song. I guess I was so entranced by the song that I wasn't really paying attention to how much was being said. I'm looking at the lyrics here and it's somewhat wordy, not to an insane degree, but there's definitely more being said than I felt was being said. I speak of feeling a certain sense of peacefulness and perhaps drifting away. I think that perfectly explains what happened to me here. I didn't really notice how much was being said. But anyways, let's jump right into it. No need to shroud the fish's absurd praise beneath the waves' embrace. The cabin overflows with wind and honeyed wine, where freedom forges its structure. As sailors learn to forgive hidden reefs, I learn to mend the ship. Is newly built vessel still truly me? In silence it remains. Alright, so those are some really nice lines to start off the song. The general feel I get for that, the general idea I believe is that we're talking about a ship in the sea, and beyond that we're seeing that the ship represents something else, right? It's being used as a metaphor, as is the sea. Some of the lines that I guess I'm holding as a constant in my mind as something that is going to be important moving forward. The cabin overflowing with wind and wine. The wind is something external that's representing a potential negative impact on the ship, whereas the honeyed wine may represent a certain level of comfort within the ship. As sailors learn to forgive the hidden reefs, I learn to mend the ship. That to me refers to this idea that, there's all these dangers in the sea, and if you get caught in one of these hidden reefs, your ship is at risk of getting damaged and potentially destroyed. It's important to be able to avoid those reefs But here he's saying, it's kind of inevitable that you'll get caught up in them, and perhaps people learn to be accepting of that, right? The idea that you can't avoid all negatives. There will be hard times. As much as he can acknowledge that, he's also feeling like he has to be able to understand how to fix up his ship so that he could keep moving forward. Is the newly built vessel still truly me? In silence it remains. I guess to me that's the first instance where it feels like the ship represents him, it represents the individual, and with that in mind, we pass through hardships, we try to move beyond them, we're accepting that they happen. We sometimes have to rebuild ourselves to keep moving forward. Is the newly built vessel still truly me? Is the person who he has worked on, is the ship that he's rebuilt still a representation of who he truly is? Or did the patchwork turn him into something completely different? So at this point, I think we're getting a pretty good idea of where he's going with this metaphor. There are hardships in life. Growth comes from those hardships based on how you respond to the situations. What direction do you go in following that? What becomes of you? What do you grow into? Well, let's see what happens next. Up next we have the chorus. The sea of time swallows me whole, from birth to ruin, sailing against the wind, swaying or withering, burying the song of fate deep within, leaving behind the tide's pendulum, renewing and reloading the soul, scattering into fiber. One important component that seems to be added is the idea of time. There's mention of the sea of time swallowing him whole, and also a mention of the pendulum. And with the conditions that were presented here with the harsh winds, perhaps it's presenting this idea of, perhaps an impending doom. There's also mention of scattering into fiber. If we're talking about the boat and the wood, it kind of presents this idea of destruction here. But directly preceding that line about scattering into fiber, we have renewing and reloading the soul. So it kind of goes back to the end of verse 1 where he's saying, newly built vessel, is it still truly me? He's learned that these are the conditions of the sea, and this is what he has to accept if he's ever going to accomplish what he's trying to accomplish. He does have to sail against those winds. Those winds will have a negative impact on his ship, which, again, the ship represents him in a certain sense. How does he respond to the situation, and what does he grow into as a result? That's what I get out of that so far. Next verse. Pay no heed to seagulls' boasts, claiming docile skies brew storms. When cracks appear, the hull trembles, praying through the night, yet the sail reveals candidly this is not the end for the drifting soul. Who has forgotten that weathered ship? Why do you remain silent? So we start off this verse in a similar way to verse 1, where there's a certain emphasis being put on creatures that are outside of the boat. It's like they're communicating something, but we're ignoring it. With verse 1, we were talking about the fish's absurd praise, and we're kind of invalidating it by calling it absurd. With verse 2, we're saying pay no heed to the seagull's boasts, and, pay no heed. We're saying, don't worry about it, just don't even think about it. What they're boasting about here, seemingly, is that docile skies brew storms. In essence, that signifies that the seagulls could actually help you. Their boasting is a sign of what's to come, and metaphorically, you could use that to potentially better prepare yourself for harsh conditions. But the thing is, we're ignoring those warning signs, and then when the harsh conditions do come around, we're kind of relying on the ship to get us through. And here, I think that's kind of portrayed with when cracks appear, the hull trembles. The hull is the body of the ship, right? So if that's trembling, it's kind of signifying that there is a sense of danger. But within that context, we also have a sign of hope. The sail reveals that this is not the end for the drifting soul. So I find this metaphor pretty fascinating at this point, because you try and visualize what's going on here. And what I picture is you have this ship that's sailing relatively smoothly, things are okay, it's good times, but then there are these warning signs ahead, which is represented by the seagull's boasts in this verse, and the sailor almost arrogantly ignores it because they feel like things are okay, they don't need to worry. But then the storm comes along, the harsh conditions come along, and threaten the boat. But as much as those harsh conditions may have negative impacts on the ship, it almost feels like those negative conditions also breathe life into the ship. Putting myself in the perspective of a sailor here, it sounds like a terrifying situation, but the way he's describing it here, praying through the night, yet the sail reveals candidly this is not the end for the drifting soul. The wording there signifies to me that, just looking at that sail is giving him the confidence that he needs so that he can feel like he's going to be moving through, he's going to be progressing, he's going to be growing from this situation. Perhaps the smooth sailing kind of puts him in a mindset where he doesn't really feel that growth. Maybe he doesn't feel so powerful or so in control. It's almost as if responding to these hardships puts him in a position to regain control in such a way that he feels like he has some. And perhaps there's a touch of irony there, right? He probably had a little bit more control when the ship was in better conditions. There were things he could have used to his advantage to put himself in a better situation, such as taking those warning signs from the seagulls and the fish. There was perhaps a certain sense of apathy, or perhaps comfort. Maybe comfort was what it was. We talked about that in verse 1. That level of comfort probably put him in a position where he was maybe too relaxed. So maybe that survival instinct kicking in kind of lets him know he's alive and that he has some level of control and he has what it takes to prevail. Next section is the chorus once more. The sea of time swallows me whole, from birth to ruin, sailing against the wind, swaying or withering, burying the song of fate deep within, leaving behind the tide's pendulum. And just to move on a little further beyond that, renewing and reloading the soul. If the boundless void shreds me, turning desolate wood into dust, sailing against the wind. And then we kind of have the end of the chorus being brought up again with leaving behind the tide's pendulum, renewing and reloading the soul, renaming it as. So the end of the song definitely suggests that the main focus needs to be put on what becomes of the ship once it traverses the hardships. I think one of the most important lines to this song was in verse 1, I learned to mend the ship. This comes as a result of him potentially getting stuck in one of those hidden reefs and then really facing the consequences of a storm or harsh waves. There seems to be a certain level of confidence that whatever the conditions, whatever the hardship, he will find a way to persevere. Perhaps that notion is why he's not so careful when he is in the good times. It's why he's maybe willing to ignore the warning signs. But the main concern is once the ship is rebuilt, once it is fixed up, is it still truly him? Is it still truly a representation of who he is and what he wants to portray? Taking that concept out of this metaphor and into reality, the way I see it, this song is touching on the idea that we can be different people in different situations. And more specifically, emphasis is being put on who we are in the good times versus who we are in the bad times. This song would suggest perhaps that who we are in the good times may be over-reliant on who we are in the bad times. Perhaps who we are in the good times could have better navigated life at certain times, but perhaps that version of ourselves got a little bit too comfortable. But I think most importantly with this song, we're just exploring this idea that life will be life. There will be good times and bad times. We will go through a plethora of both. Our trajectory on the path of life will kind of define who we are. It will affect who and what we become. Each time we are faced with a certain situation, we learn and grow from it, and a certain version of ourselves is left behind. And that's where this concept of, rebirth is kind of being brought into play here in this song. The specific wording is renewing and reloading the soul. The way I hear that is it's given a new life almost, because there's new elements that are added to it. And with those new elements, there are things we have to leave behind. And I guess that's where this idea comes into mind. Is the vessel still truly me? Have I grown beyond what I thought myself to be? I think that's the fundamental concern that this song puts emphasis on. How do we respond to a situation, and who do we become following that situation? Do we still remain who we are, or will we lose parts of ourselves that we cherish? Perhaps that's why the version of himself that is smooth sailing is ignoring the signs. Perhaps he is purposefully remaining ignorant to those claims and those warning signs so that he could hang on to this version of himself just a little longer. He could feel that sense of security, that he won't lose this version of himself. But then the inevitable comes around and he has to deal with the harsh conditions, and in a way, growth is forced upon him. And yeah, that pretty much summarizes what I make of the song. So yeah, going back to what I was talking about earlier with respect to a certain sense of peacefulness, but then feeling like you're kind of drifting away at times with this song. I feel like the lyrics really support that idea as well. It's like you are in this environment that's just carrying you along, and you're slowly drifting towards the bad, and you know what's to come from that bad, yet you can't help but just drift along. Ultimately, there is this confidence that you will push on through, but there's still this eeriness and fear that's associated to what's to come. So yeah, that's essentially what I make of the song. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch it, and I will see you all next time. Have a great day, y'all.